Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. Listen, reflect and absorb. Dear listeners, Sai Ram and welcome to our radio series in which a divine discourse by Bhagwan is played in small parts, and following each part, a short discussion is undertaken to reflect on the message. This series is part of Radio Sai's Thursday live broadcast that goes on air at 7:30 p.m. on Asia Stream. Today's episode was first broadcast live on the 26th of December 2013 and was hosted by Prem from Team Radio Sai and Hari Shankar from the Sri Satya Sai Central Trust. The discourses undertaken for study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of the summer course in Indian culture and spirituality in the year 1990, and the clips played in this episode are from the discourse delivered on the 28th of May 1990.
Offering a most humble pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Dear listeners, this is Prem from Team Radio Sai, welcoming you to this week's episode of Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. We have today in our studios to join me Brother Hari Shankar from the Sri Satya Sai Central Trust. Dear listeners, you will be aware that we are going through the 1990 Summer Course series. We've gone through 9 discourses so far. This is the 10th one in that series. We're beginning a new discourse this week. But before we go into the discourse, before we talk about what Swami is here, the topic which Swami is going to talk to us today about, I, on behalf of all of you, welcome Brother Hari Shankar. Saram Hari.
Saram Prem. Thank you for having me on.
I don't know what to say about this discourse, because one pattern which we have noticed in this series of discourses is Swami is going subtler and subtler.
Yes.
He began with culture, which is more or less related to community living.
Right.
Then he went on to an individual, then from the body, the senses, to the mind.
Yes.
Then the different aspects of the mind, the buddhi, chitta and all the others. And then ahankara.
Yeah.
That's the subtlest so far.
Yes.
And now Swami has gone into gunas. And so in that pattern, this is definitely one of the more subtler and more complex of all we've gone through so far.
Yeah, pretty much the building block of everything that he has spoken so far. So
right.
Gunas, as in Indian system of philosophy, represents the building blocks of
right. I think maybe it wouldn't be out of place to begin with a brief introduction of what is this concept of gunas in Indian understanding, because though we use it so often, it's of course attribute is the closest maybe translation in English we could find.
Yeah.
But I think it's much more varied in meaning than that.
Yes. One of the translation of gunas would be in terms of tendencies, like as in forces. Like
okay.
So as I said, it's the building block of creation, and creation involves movement. So or change or evolution.
Right.
So these are the forces of literally of evolution or change or creation. So that is to say, so sattva, it represents peace or equilibrium. So when we are talking in the context of, let's say, creation or nature, so sattva represents the aspect of equilibrium or peace, When we come to rajas, it's the aspect of excitation, so of quick movement. And when it comes to tamas, it is regarded as a retarding force, as a retardant or sloth or inertia.
Right.
Yeah. So that is how the gunas are talked about. In fact, if you really look at the entire series of discourses, Swami is actually elaborating on a system of philosophy which is called the Sankhya philosophy.
Okay.
So this, as do almost all systems of philosophy in India, all of them have their basis in the Vedas and the Upanishads.
Right. So
especially when you look at this particular system of philosophy, we find its origins in the primary Upanishads, Shvetashvatara Upanishad and the Chandogya Upanishad.
Okay.
So that is where the first beginnings of this kind of discussion, of this kind of model of what this universe is, what is the individual.
Right,
that
the
is
secret behind creation, or something like how this whole thing has come to be.
Yeah, it kind of explains like what is creation, or what are you and I made up of in the first place. Like how are we here? What is our purpose in this universe? The entire philosophy is directed towards like establishing how we got created, what are we to do in this world, what is our final purpose. And about the purpose, they're pretty clear. It is like going back to our source, the divine origin of all of us. But it also details like how do we really, what is the method to go back for the jiva to go back to that particular
Right.
origin. To elaborate a little more on what this philosophy is, how does it look at the world, how does it look at creation? So here there are two aspects called Purusha and Prakriti.
Okay.
So Purusha is that what we know as the undifferentiated consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
It is pure, untainted, and it is the most important thing is unmanifest. It remains as the potential.
Okay.
And then you have something called Prakriti. And Prakriti is what Swami has been talking about. It is the unconscious aspect. It is the Chitta, Mano, Buddhi, Ahankara, the senses. So all of these represent the unconscious nature, Prakriti. So now what the system of philosophy states is that this Prakriti, it remains as it is, unexpressed, when all the three gunas are in equilibrium. And then when Purusha actually enters, it enters into this Prakriti, is when Prakriti actually now becomes manifested. Like what we call the jiva is actually when Purusha enters into Prakriti and creates the entire world. So the manifest world is when Purusha and Prakriti come together. One interpretation of the idol Nataraja, as they say, is
Right.
the dance of creation.
Right.
And so Shiva and Parvati, when they dance, this is the Tandava dance, it is representative of this aspect of creation. That Purusha and Prakriti, they come together, and that's how the dance of this world, of this universe happens.
Right. And, having had that introduction, it puts a lot of things in perspective because,
Yes.
When Swami spoke about Ahankara and Swami spoke about Buddhi, even for that matter, when he spoke about the body and the senses,
Yeah.
the emphasis was always on how to use these instruments
Yes.
to go to a level which is deeper,
Absolutely.
to use these to, gravitate towards the goal of life.
Yes.
And when Swami came to Buddhi, Swami said Buddhi is that discriminating tool which is given to you, which actually decides that yes, I need to take this path.
Yes.
And then Swami said that which actually may stall this progress would be the Ahankara. And
Yes.
then Swami spoke about Ahankara. But when you go through all this, definitely at some point you get the question that how did this separation happen first of all? And I think as an answer to that is the three gunas.
Yes.
Swami says this is how the creation came to be. This is how the separation came to be. This is how the Purusha or the unmanifest has manifest in the form of creation.
As we actually we'll be seeing in the discourse, or we'll be listening to the discourse, and you'll see like how Swami explains that the entire creation is just a play of the three gunas. So,
Right.
So
it is, I think, from what you've said, one thing is human attributes
Yes.
could also be defined as gunas. Some person could be called Satwic. Some people may be,
Yes.
termed as tamasic. It is, I remember when there was a presentation on the three gunas in our class, in the awareness class, we came up with this idea where we took a fan and
Right.
we put different colors on the blades of the fan.
right,
We switched on the fan. And so we would ask the class, what is the color you see?
right,
So they would say that, there's a green color, there was a red color. When we switch off the fan, we would show that actually it had all the three colors.
three colors. Yeah.
It's just that one color which is predominant, and when you looked at the fan which was moving, you said this is the color which is there.
Yeah.
So we said this is what happens when we look at people.
Yes.
It's not that they're bereft of the other gunas,
Yes.
but the predominant guna is what you associate that person with.
Yes. This is very similar actually to the model of creation which is spoken about in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad. What I just described
Okay.
is pretty similar to a visualization. So they visualize a god or creation in terms of a wheel.
Okay.
And this wheel has these three parts, and
Okay.
then they divide into many spokes. It's a very complex thing, but
Okay.
at very basic structure, what you described is similar
Okay.
to what is mentioned
Right.
in that Upanishad.
So that's one thing. One thing is to go by the attributes of people whom you see.
Yeah.
That is also termed as gunas. Gunas also mean character, and that's another definition of the Sanskrit word guna.
Yes.
Somebody's character, you say.
Yes.
So that is basically, you could say that he's either pious,
Yeah.
or he's vibrant and active,
Yes.
or he's lethargic or,
Yeah.
lazy. But also the other definition is these are the basic, qualities which were created before creation came by.
Absolutely.
These were the ripples by which, the final separation as we see it
Yeah.
as individuals has come by.
Yeah, that's why the one of the words they use is tendencies. So,
Tendencies,
yeah,
right.
more than characteristics. Like, it's a play, all the three gunas, they combine. So everything that we see is not just applicable to people, anything, any aspect of creation, in fact.
Right.
Very complex way of describing. Like the element called earth, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So later in the discourse, Swami will talk about how earth is created by the gunas. But this is not the earth that we speak about. So further, these 5 elements, they combine to form earth in very varying proportions. They combine and form the earth that we know, that what we
Right.
live on. So that is at the very basic is the gunas. So the gunas, they combine in very different ways and they form the elements. The elements again, they combine in very different ways and they form the substances that we see around us.
So I think, and that for an intro, we'll go into the discourse.
Yes.
We'll listen to what Swami has to say, and definitely Swami will have the best way of putting it. So
Precisely.
we'll listen to Swami and let's see if we could summarize what Swami is saying in that discourse clip.
Yeah.
Bhaskara bimbe deeptam daivam Bhaskara bimbe deeptam daivam Lochana madhya chuttam daivam Sitakara mandala Guptam Daivam Sitakara Mandala Guptam Daivam Trigunita Bhavanam Vyaptam Daivam Trigunita Bhavanam Vyaptam Daivam Bhaskara bimbe deeptam daivam Bhaskara bimbe deeptam daivam Lochana madhya suttam daivam Sitakara mandala guptam daivam Daivam Sitakara mandala Guptam Daivam Trigunita Bhavanam Vyaptam Daivam Trigunita Bhavanam Vyaptam Daivam ప్రేమ స్వరూపులైన విద్యార్థులారా,
students, embodiments of divine love.
సర్వం కల్విదం బ్రహ్మ, విశ్వం విష్ణు స్వరూపం.
The entire universe is the very form of Vishnu, and God is found everywhere.
భాస్కర బింబే దీప్తం దైవం. సూర్యుని యొక్క కిరణముల యొక్క ముందు ప్రకాశించేటువంటి వాడు, ప్రకటించేటువంటి వాడు దైవమే.
God is the one who shines and declares himself in the rays of sun.
లోచన మధ్య సుప్తం దైవం. ప్రతి మానవుని యొక్క నేత్రముల మధ్య జగత్తును చూపించి, ప్రకటింపజేసి, వికసింపజేసి, ప్రకాశింపజేసేటువంటి వాడు దైవం.
God is the one who makes the eye function and see and enjoy the manifested form of God, and that is the world.
చితకర మండల గుప్తం దైవం. చంద్రుని మధ్య ఉన్నటువంటి యొక్క చల్లదనము, తెల్లదనము, లోక శాంతిని అందించేటువంటి యొక్క దివ్యత్వము దైవమే.
The coolness, the whiteness, and the immense peace which moon confers on the world is also God.
త్రిగుణిత భవనౌ వ్యాప్తం దైవం. త్రికాలాత్మకమైనటువంటి ఈ జగత్తునందు, త్రిమూర్తాత్మకమైనటువంటి ఈ జగత్తునందు త్రిగుణ స్వరూపములో ప్రకటించేటువంటి యొక్క దివ్యత్వం భగవంతమే.
This world, which consists of three times past, present and future, and three Murtis, Trinity, it is God who expresses himself in the form of three qualities.
ప్రకృతి యొక్క చిత్రము మహా విచిత్రము.
The nature of creation is rather wonderful.
ఎవ్వరూ దీనిని గుర్తించలేరు.
No one can realize this.
ముంచిన, తేల్చిన, అనుగ్రహించిన, ఆగ్రహించిన ప్రకృతి.
It is the nature which can give you, confer on you grace, or which can show its own anger, which can confer everything on the man.
జీవకోటి పైన ఆధిపత్యం ప్రకృతిది.
Nature exercises its own mastery over man.
ఈ ప్రకృతి త్రిగుణాత్మకమైనటువంటిది.
This nature and creation consists of three qualities.
ఈ త్రిగుణాత్మకమైనటువంటి ప్రపంచమే త్రిమూర్తి స్వరూపము.
This world, which consists of three qualities, is also the form of Trinity.
ఇవియే సృష్టి స్థితి లయమునకు త్రిగుణములే మూల కారణం.
For the creation, sustenance and dissolution, it is these three qualities which are responsible.
త్రిగుణముల యొక్క స్వరూప స్వభావాలతో,
The form and the nature of these three qualities,
విశేష వికారాలతో,
the special features and the way that they function,
సరస సల్లాపాలతో,
the joy and the sorrow they are capable of conferring,
లోకాలను ప్రకాశించేటువంటిది, ప్రకటింపజేసేటువంటిది త్రిగుణములే.
it is these three very qualities which fill the world with all these things and which make the creation express itself in all this variety.
మానవుడు దిగ్గ జీవితం కోసం కాదు ఆశించవలసినది, దివ్య జీవితం కోసం ఆశించాలి.
What man should aspire for is not for a long life, but for divine life.
దివ్యమైనటువంటి ఈ ప్రకృతి యందు దివ్యమైనటువంటి మానవత్వము, దివ్యత్వాన్ని పొందటమే ప్రధాన కర్తవ్యం.
The most important duty of humanity is to see that they become divine as they are living in the divine nature.
సృష్టి యొక్క రహస్యము సృష్టికర్తకు తప్ప అన్యులకు అర్థం కాదు.
The secret of creation is known to the Creator alone, to none else.
సృష్టి యొక్క రహస్యమును గుర్తించడానికి ప్రయత్నించేటువంటి వారే ఈ సైంటిస్ట్.
The scientists are those who try to understand the secrets of nature.
ఈ సృష్టి యొక్క రహస్యమును కూడాను పరిపూర్ణంగా ఎవరు కూడాను గుర్తించలేరు.
No person would be able to understand the secrets and the mystery of nature in all its fullness.
ఈ వైజ్ఞానమునందు ఈనాటి పరిశోధన రేపటికి పాతదైపోతుంది.
In science, today's research becomes outdated tomorrow.
రేపటి దినము యొక్క పరిశీలన ఎల్లుండికి పాతదైపోతుంది.
And tomorrow's research get exploded.
కానీ ఈ వైజ్ఞానిక వ్యక్తి యందు పాతదంతా రోతదిగా భావించుకుంటూ పోతుంటాడు.
In the science, what happens is everything old is considered as out of
కనుక
fashion.
సృష్టి అంతయు కూడాను కేవలము క్షణమునకును మార్పు చెందినటువంటిది.
The creation undergoes continuous change.
ఇది నిత్యమైనది, సత్యమైనటువంటిది కాదు.
This is not permanent and this is not eternal.
నిత్య సత్య నిర్మలమైనటువంటి యొక్క తత్వము సృష్టికర్తని.
It is the Creator who is permanent, who is eternal and who is truth.
సృష్టికర్తను పరిశీలన చేసి పరిశోధన చేసి సృష్టికర్తను పొందేటువంటిదే ఆధ్యాత్మిక మార్గం.
Spirituality is that path which makes you first investigate into the Creator and understand Creator and then go for creation.
ఈ చరాచర ప్రపంచమంతయు కూడాను కేవలం త్రిగుణాత్మకమై ఉన్నటువంటిది.
The entire world, moving and unmoving, consists of these three qualities alone.
కనుక గుణాతీతమైనటువంటి తత్వాన్ని గుర్తించేటువంటి వ్యక్తిత్వమే నిజమైనటువంటి మానవత్వం.
The real humanity consists of making an effort to understand the transcendental truth rather than the truth which is subject to the changes.
That was the first clip in that discourse. It's quite an introductory phase of that discourse, one could say.
Yeah.
Just a couple of points which Swami is making there. One thing which Swami is very clearly saying is Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. That everything that you see, that you feel around,
Yes.
that you experience around you, everything is God.
Yeah.
But as we just said before playing that clip, the question comes then why that diversity?
Yes.
What is creating this difference? What is making us see these as different?
Yeah.
And Swami brings in the idea that is where, the gunas come in. Yes, everything is God, but you see them as different. What is it that is bringing this disparity together? And that is the three gunas.
Yes. In fact, right at the very beginning, of course, Swami is now going to delve very deeply into what nature is, like what constitutes nature, etc. But you see, right at the beginning, he is reminding us that no matter what it is the divine that permeates everything.
Right.
Like he brings in this example. He says that it is the divine that shines in the rays of the sun and reveals the divinity through his eyes.
Right.
There is this Kenopanishad which echoes the lines of, which reminds us of what Swami is saying. And it says, not that which the eye can see,
that which makes the
that
eye
which
see.
makes the eye see. Know that to be Brahman and not what people here adore.
Right.
Likewise, for all the senses, like everything is, it's not something that the senses can perceive. It is something that makes the senses perceive.
Right. It's quite understandable. I mean, just looking at it practically and, scientifically.
Yes.
If you ask somebody, how are you able to see? You might say it's because of my eye.
Yeah.
But the fact is you're able to see because of light.
Precisely, yes.
And, the existence of light and giving light the ability to make objects visible to you, that quality of light, I mean, that is where when Swami talks about philosophy and Swami talks about spirituality and science, science is dwelling up to, what is making you see.
Precisely.
But spirituality is going to the point, what has given the ability of light to make objects visible to you?
Yes.
What has given light that quality,
Yeah. I was just reading something a few days ago. There is this famous biologist, a geneticist. His name is Richard Dawkins. Many years ago, he wrote a very excellent book called The Selfish Gene, which basically it seeks to explain every behavior of man, everything that we do in nature in terms of genes. So it's called the gene-centric theory. So it has been literally this, one of the standing positions of biology for all these years. But I was just reading the other day how some recent, researchers into the behavior of certain relationships between animals. They've actually been studying the genes so closely. And now they realize that that is not the correct model as to how nature behaves.
Okay.
In fact, they're more and more perplexed because earlier they thought that it is the organism which serves the genes. And now they're seeing that the relationship is so complex that sometimes the organism actually demands something from the genes and the genes express according to the need of the organism.
Okay.
It's called epigenetic. So the surroundings, they demand a certain kind of behavior from the organism. And it is as if the organism literally commands the genes to now behave in a totally different manner. So that, now the organism is able to actually respond to that.
So does that mean that the idea of selfish gene is that the gene uses the...
Gene is the fundamental unit and uses the
organism as a means to express itself.
But now they're saying that may not explain entirely the relationship between the organism and the gene. There are times when the organism actually causes the gene to express itself in a different way.
Okay.
So this is what I was trying to... what I got reminded of when Swami was talking about this, how scientists, they have a certain way of looking at creation. And that the fact that this is not the way that we can really apprehend what is the secret of creation.
Right. And that is again echoed by what Swami is telling here, in a sense that, what was scientific discovery today
Yes.
becomes obsolete tomorrow.
Absolutely.
But, if you look at it, thousands and thousands of seekers have poured through the Upanishads.
Yes.
But, you don't find them actually obsolete or wrong.
Yes.
It is just maybe a different way of looking at the same truth.
Yes.
And when you finally reach the truth, you find that, this is just a different way, just a different angle. But
Yes.
it is still echoing that same truth.
Yes. It's like literally like the ladder, you climb different rungs of the ladder, and every time as you climb, the whole landscape looks different every single time. So it's not that the lower rungs are any less useful.
Right.
You needed them to climb to the higher rungs. So this is one of the things that really came out. And the other thing that Swami talks about, that again, like setting the setting, he's giving the setting for the entire discourse and the discussion. He's saying, what is the reason for contemplating into creation? And he's pretty clear that there is only one thing that we can learn from creation, the fact that it is always changing.
Right.
That everything in creation is mutable. It keeps transforming into something, or it either goes out of existence, comes into existence. But you must also recognize that behind all this, there is one unchanging principle. So that is what we should fix our attention on. And Swami says that is the reason for why a spiritual aspirant, he investigates nature and creation, which is the reason why Swami is actually delving into these topics in this particular discourse.
And another beautiful point which is actually connected to this, which Swami says, is he's saying aspire to live a divine life, not a long life.
Not a long life. Yes.
No, that's again a mistake which you do when you are not looking deep. You're only trying to increase life expectancy. You're only trying to increase the number of years a man or woman will lead. But Swami is saying that is not important. How much of the truth are you able to comprehend in that period of time you live? That is more important than how long you are managing to live.
Yes, I actually remember our convocation. So at the time of the convocation, Swami gives a benedictory address.
Right.
And over these years, as a management student, I have read the benedictory discourses of so many such invitees at different these convocation functions of different universities, like Steve Jobs or
Right.
Jeff Bezos of Amazon. So these talks, of course, are very famous and they give a lot of insight. But if you look at Swami's discourses, which he gives at the time of convocation, he has a very interesting message, which is in total contradiction to what the other benedictory addresses are like. So the other benedictory addresses, they begin by congratulating all these students and all the graduates for what degrees they've obtained, the effort that they've put in, and they give advice on how to have that degree, how to convert that degree into some success, money and fame in life. Whereas Swami directly begins by saying that you have earned your degrees, that is great. However, I do not consider this as important at all. And he says, unless this education which you have got is translated into inquiry into the Atma, into reality, none of this is of any avail. It is a completely, contradictory stand that Swami takes.
Right. That's what Swami expresses even in the mission statement of the university. He's saying that it is just incidental that we are giving out degrees.
Yes.
We might give you an MBA, MA or whatever it is.
Yes.
But it's just maybe the side dish.
Yes.
To put it, because Swami is saying the goal of this institute is to inspire you to go towards self-realization.
Yes.
To ask these questions which are vital for human life.
Yes.
That is the very goal of this university. And as you said, convocation is just the day when you're saying that you're equipped now go and start being a seeker.
Yes.
Or rather you should have started by then. But it's just that it's just another day.
Yes.
But that doesn't entitle you for anything except that you're equipped.
Yeah. And now actually coming back to what the main body of this discourse is about, and Swami says that nature is primarily composed of the three gunas, that what we normally call as sattva, rajas and tamas. So Swami is saying that these are the basic building blocks. These are the forces that literally permeate and create what nature is, what we see around us and what we are ourselves and what the jiva is composed of. And not only that, Swami says that in fact these account for the processes of creation, sustenance and dissolution. So in fact in many places we see this association that Sattva is associated with the process of creation and Rajas with the process of that preservation, transforming that what is created into different aspects.
Right.
And finally dissolution, which is what Laya, which is associated with the Tamoguna.
Destruction.
Yeah. So Swami points out that all the gunas, these are what account for every phenomenon that we see around us. So like if you and I occur in a certain way to people, that we say that he's a person who is given to be very dynamic, or he's a person who is given to be lazy. And Swami says that at the very root of all this is the play of the gunas.
Right. And it's quite interesting because one thing which Swami says, especially when he starts talking about nature, is he's saying, to say the least, nature is marvelous.
Yes.
He's saying nobody has ever understood and nobody can ever understand. And it's true for anything. Any scientist would agree with that. You take a leaf, the amount of processes which happen in that baffle you. You take a fruit, a fruit becoming a fruit from that stage where it's raw. It involves, I think, a few thousand biochemical reactions. To do that in a lab, it would take us 3 PhDs. But every fruit and every tree is doing that.
Yes.
And here is Swami saying that divinity alone permeates everything, which means, when you look at something like that in nature and you're filled with awe, imagine you are the one who is the source of all that. You are the one which has happened, who's creating all these things around.
That is a very important point you have brought up, because as if you really start inquiring into, the whole nature is a play of gunas, and Swami is going to really elaborate as to how different aspects of nature arise from these gunas. But if we really think about, why should we even, aspire for anything? If you start thinking about gunas and the play of gunas, you realize that you are the effect of these gunas. This is what is the first understanding that you come to, that you really don't have, you react to stimuli because you have a certain equilibrium of gunas within you.
Right.
So then what you said, that in reality you are the source of it all, is what really is the basis for any sadhana that we do. That we are not merely the effect, that we can also move to being the cause. So that is a very important point, when we are, otherwise there is nothing to be gained from realizing that we are the play of gunas. Is there something that we can do to, change the balance of gunas that is there within us?
Right.
Is there some way that we can affect the gunas themselves? That is something that we have to inquire into.
And also from the fact that, when you look at it this way, you look at people around not as people who are causing a stimuli on you or, are a source of a stimuli, but you also look at them as, maybe if you really go in deeply into gunas, you just see them as lights from a prism. It's just that same light which is just showing up in different shades. And when that comes, the effect it will have on your reactions is going to be completely different.
So true.
When you look at Swami and when you observe Swami and you say that here is a personality, he's doing this, this is right, this is wrong. You say that, he is speaking like this is harsh, this is soft, this is a loving gesture, this is a very rude gesture.
Yes.
But the moment you accept Swami as divinity, you say that this is God, this is Parabrahman, the way you look at every action of his is completely different.
Yes.
The effect that Swami's action now has on your perception is totally different. And bringing that to everything around you in nature, every person that you meet is going to have a completely, a paradigm shift on the way you look at the world itself.
Yes. Because one of the things that we should see, even in the Sankhya system of philosophy they talk about, they say that the Purusha himself, for a Swami, he is beyond the gunas.
Right.
Our existence is in terms of the gunas, but there is what is beyond existence, what is unmanifest has nothing to do with the gunas itself. It is beyond the 3 gunas. Which is why, sometimes when I think about Swami, you would not see him having a certain fixed way of responding to situations at all. So you and I can be characterized in terms of personalities, literally predictable as to what we can do. Whereas with Swami, he says, love my uncertainty. And the reason is because the way Swami responds is entirely according to what is appropriate in that situation.
Right.
Whereas you and I, we tend to act according to, as we call, we are the effect of these gunas. So Swami he has seen the truth that he is beyond the gunas. So whatever action that he does in a particular situation is actually totally appropriate to that. So in certain situations, you might see him showing what you call as compassion. Or in some situations, it might actually occur to each one of us as to why has Swami hardened his heart so much. But in every such occasion, Swami is actually demonstrating how he is totally beyond the gunas and can act as the situation, as is appropriate to the situations, totally spontaneously.
Right. In fact, I remember once Swami telling to a person, he said, it is God who helps the deer find grass. Okay. And the moment you hear that, you feel, oh, God is so compassionate.
Yes.
But then Swami said, remember, the same God helps the lion find the deer. And he said, this is what God actually does to you. He enters into your frame of goodness. He enters into your definition of sattva.
Yes.
And then he expands to that real state, which is actually, gunatita. That's what Swami says, that divinity is beyond gunas.
Beyond the three gunas, yeah.
And in that process, you not only understand God, but you also understand your very nature.
Yes.
Because that is the very purpose of coming to a guru or, an avatar.
I remember sitting during one darshan, and there was one particular devotee, I think he had been through a lot of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And he suddenly, the entire hall was quiet. Everybody was just looking at Swami, who was seated, in the portico, Ganesh portico. And this particular person, he started crying out. He said, Swami, save me, and all, so many, he started narrating his tale of woe from far.
Okay.
And Swami just sat there so impassively.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really wondering, and there's one teacher, I think it was so, that expression was there of confusion on his face, because he expected that Swami will do something for that particular person. But Swami just looked on impassively, did not even turn his head. And at some point of time, like, that person was asked to quiet down, and then Swami looked at that particular teacher and he asked, what happened? So this person was still, that confusion was so evident on his face. He asked Swami, I thought you'll do something for that person. And Swami just smiled at him and asked one very simple question. He asked him, do you have more compassion or do I have?
Typically of Swami.
Yes, so that is the Guru. We have that faith in the Guru that he knows everything, the past, present, and future.
Right.
And the gunas also are supposed to represent, this triumvirate of past, present, future also. So,
exactly. Verily, that's what Swami is doing to us. It is that complete state of acceptance. You can go through it through inquiry or devotion. The idea is that state of acceptance. When you say that, yes, whatever is, could be only, a play of that same consciousness. That is the idea which you have to get to.
Yes.
Maybe it's through devotion or through inquiry.
Right.
So, shall we go to the next clip in that discourse?
Yes, I think, it's very important to see. I think we sort of got the basis of what Swami is going to speak about next.
But I think it's really getting into tougher and tougher zones.
భగవంతుడు ఆత్మస్వరూపుడు.
God is the very embodiment of Atma.
సత్య జ్ఞానం అనంతం బ్రహ్మ అని బ్రహ్మమన్నా, సత్యమన్నా, అనంతమన్నా, ఆత్మ అన్నా, భగవంతుడన్నా, దేవుడన్నా, ఇవి అన్ని కేవలము ఒక్క పదము యొక్క పర్యాయములే.
Truth, wisdom, infinity, divinity, all these are all synonyms.
కనుక మొట్టమొదట ఆత్మ నుండి పంచభూతములు ఆవిర్భవించాయి.
5 elements have taken their birth from Atma.
అయితే పంచభూతముల యందు పంచతత్వముల యొక్క తత్వాన్ని ఇముడ్చుకొని ఉంటున్నాయి.
These 5 elements have embedded within themselves the 5 important principles.
ఈ పంచభూతముల నుండి కూడాను పంచీకృతము ఆరంభమైంది.
Panchikruta has emanated from these 5 elements.
ఈ పంచీకృత భావము నుండి ఆవిర్భవించినటువంటివే ఈ త్రిగుణములు.
These 3 qualities have taken their birth from this Panchikruta.
ఈ త్రిగుణముల యొక్క ఆకారమే ఈ విశ్వం.
This world is the very form of these 3 qualities.
ఈ విశ్వమునందు సత్వ, రజో, తమో గుణములు అనేటువంటి త్రిగుణాత్మక స్వరూపము నిండి ఉంటున్నది.
This world is full of these three qualities, saloon, sattva, raja and tam.
ఈ సత్య సృష్టి యొక్క రహస్యాన్ని మొట్టమొదట గుర్తించాలి.
In the very first instance, we should understand the quality of sattva.
సత్య సృష్టి యొక్క సమష్టి యొక్క సత్యాంశమే అంతఃకరణం.
Antahkarana is the manifestation of the collectivity of the creation.
పంచభూతముల యొక్క సమష్టి సత్వాంశమే ఈ అంతఃకరణ.
This Antahkarana is an expression of sattva associated with 5 elements.
అయితే ఈ ఆకాశము నుండి కూడాను సత్వ సృష్టి అయినటువంటి యొక్క ఇది వ్యష్టి శబ్దాన్ని అనుభవిస్తూ వచ్చింది.
From this ether sky, what has emanated as Satwic aspect of creation has enjoyed always this sattva quality itself.
ఈ పంచభూతముల్లో ఆకాశము మొదటిది.
Among the 5 elements, ether is the first one.
ఈ ఆకాశం యొక్క వ్యక్తితత్వం నుండి కూడాను శుద్ధ సత్వం అనేటువంటి యొక్క అంశం ఒకటి బయలుదేరింది.
A pure sattva has emanated from the individual aspect of this akasha or sky, ether.
ఇదియే మానవ ఆకారమునకు ప్రథమ స్థానం.
This is the basis of the human forms in the very
మానవత్వమునకు ఈ విధమైనటువంటి అంశముల యొక్క ప్రభావము, ప్రసక్తి, పరిపూర్ణతను ప్రారంభం కావటం.
The fullness and the sacredness of the human aspect has come from this alone.
కనుక ఆకాశం యొక్క వ్యక్తి సత్వము నుండి కూడాను చెవి అనేటువంటిది పుట్టింది.
From the individual aspect of this ether and from sattva, this sharir has taken its birth. The ear has taken its birth.
ఇంకా రెండవదైనటువంటిది గాలి. ఇది రెండవ భూతము పంచభూతముల్లో.
The second element is air.
ఈ గాలి నుండి వ్యష్టిసత్వమైనటువంటి యొక్క అంశమే చర్మము.
The individualized aspect of this air is the skin.
మూడవదైన అగ్ని.
The
ఈ
third one,
అగ్ని యొక్క వ్యష్టి సత్వాంశమే కన్ను.
the individualized Satwic aspect of the fire is the eye.
నాలుగవదైనటువంటి యొక్క నీరు. దీని వ్యష్టి యొక్క సత్వాంశమే నాలుక.
The Satwic aspect of, individualized Satwic aspect of water is the tongue.
ఐదవదైనటువంటి యొక్క భూతము కేవలము ప్రకృతి.
The fifth element is Prakriti, nature.
ప్రకృతి యొక్క వ్యష్టి సత్వాంశమే ముక్కు.
The individualized Satwic aspect of nature is the nose.
కనుక శబ్ద, స్పర్శ, రూప, రస, గంధములు అనేటువంటి యొక్క ఈ ఎలిమెంట్స్ భూతములు ఈ యొక్క ప్రథమం నందు సాత్వికమైనటువంటి యొక్క శుద్ధ సత్వం నుంచి ఆరంభమైనాయి.
These 5 aspects, the sound, the touch, the taste, the smell, and the form,
అయితే
all these have come from.
ఒక్కొక్క భూతములకు వ్యష్టి భూతము కనుక ఆ వ్యష్టి నుండి ఆవిర్భవించినటువంటి ఈ అంగములు ఒక్కొక్క పనికి మాత్రమే ఉపయోగించుకోవడానికి వీలవుతుంది.
In an individual, there are these 5 senses. Each sense can be used for a specific purpose.
ఆకాశం యొక్క గుణము శబ్దము.
The important characteristic of ether is sound.
శబ్దమునకు చిహ్నము చెవి.
The symbol which is associated or
చెవి
the,
కేవలము వినుట మాత్రమే తప్ప అన్యము ఎరుగదు.
the sense meant for hearing the sound is ear. This can hear alone and nothing else can be done by that.
అదే విధముగానే రెండవ భూతమైనటువంటి గాలి, ఇది స్పర్శ, ఇది కేవలము చర్మము.
The second element is air and that is associated with touch.
ఇది
And
స్పర్శ
that
తప్ప ఇది శ్రవణం చేయటం వీలు కాదు.
skin is meant for experiencing touch. But
దీనికి
it cannot
శ్రవణ
hear.
శక్తి లేదు.
It does not have the power of hearing.
మూడవది అగ్ని,
The third one is fire.
ఇది కన్ను, దీని అంశము.
This aspect is expressed in
ఇది
terms of eye.
చూడగలదే కాని స్మరించలేదు.
Eye can see but cannot enjoy touch.
నాలుగవది నీరు, ఇది జిహ్వ, నాలుక.
Tongue is the aspect of water.
నాలుక రుచి చూడగలదే కాని వ్యక్తిని చూడలేదు.
It can enjoy taste but it cannot see the form of a person.
ప్రకృతి యొక్క అంశము ముక్కు,
Nose is the aspect of
ఇది
Prakriti
వాసన
nature.
చూడగలదే కాని రుచిని చూడలేదు.
It can smell but cannot taste.
అయితే ఇవి అంశముల యొక్క ప్రతిబింబములు కౌట చేత ఒక్కొక్క గుణము మాత్రమే ఇది స్వీకరిస్తూ వచ్చింది.
As these five senses are only a reflection of the five elements, each
అయితే
particular sense,
సమష్టి స్వరూపమైనటువంటి పంచభూతముల యొక్క స్వరూపమే అంతఃకరణ.
but Antahkarana is the collective aspect of all these five elements.
అంతఃకరణకు శబ్ద స్పర్శ రూప రసగంధములు అన్నింటినీ అనుభవించేటువంటి అధికారం ఉంటుండాలి.
Antahkarana has the power to enjoy all these sounds, touch, smell, form and taste.
కనుకని అంతఃకరణ అనగా ఇవి కేవలము శబ్ద స్పర్శ రూప రసగంధాదులు జ్ఞానేంద్రియములకు మాత్రమే సంబంధించినటువంటిది.
These five aspects which are associated with Antahkarana are enjoyed through inner sense organs.
Yes, that was a clip, and needless to say, I think it's quite deep. We'll just hope and try to make a few points of, giving a little bit of order of what Swami said there. One thing which Swami is making clear is, that the play of that which is unmanifest with the gunas
Yes.
is what gave rise to the five elements, as we see it. It's often mentioned so many times in the Vedas too. The Akasha, space, air, water,
Yes.
land
Fire.
and fire. And Swami is saying the further interaction of these gunas with these elements is what gives rise to the senses.
It evolves from that.
Right. And the interesting point which Swami is making here is each of these senses is nothing but an expression of only the Satwic nature of these
Yes,
elements.
absolutely.
It is not the other two elements.
Yes.
Like Swami is making the point here that Akasha's Satwic nature has resulted in that of the ear, right?
Yeah.
Ear.
Yeah.
And fire's Satwic nature has resulted in the eyes. And the Satwic nature of earth is resulted in the nose.
Nose and so on. Yes.
Right. And one of the points that Swami made in the discourse about the senses is that you have to understand the nature of the senses and then you will use it only for that purpose.
Right.
And here Swami is saying how every sense has its basis only in the interaction of that element with Sattva.
Sattva itself. Yes.
With Sattva itself.
Purity.
That's a very important point, and again goes back to what Swami says, see good, do good, be good. It is not that this is what you have to do for progress, but this is what it is meant for.
It began as.
It began for
Yes.
this very purpose.
At its provenance, as you mentioned, all of these particular faculties, they have as a provenance the interaction of purity with
Right.
with these particular elements. Yes.
Right.
That's a very good point that you brought out. And then Swami goes on to say that the Antahkarana, this Manobuddhi, Chitta, Ahankara, these senses, they feed into this. That is the Antahkarana, it integrates what it receives from the sense objects.
That's again a very profound point which Swami makes, because Swami is telling each of these senses have only one functionality. The ear can only hear, the eye can only see, but it is this Antahkarana which actually has the ability to do all these.
Right.
And that is why they are a combination of all the elements as well as all the sensory perceptions also.
Yes. And like I was just, kind of in my mind, there's a link that was forming like between what was discussed in the previous program. So I was just listening to some part of that program before we came on to this. So there they were discussing music.
Right. The bhajan tutor, right.
The bhajan tutor, when it was going on, they were discussing on particular bhajan. So normally as a lay person, like I have not studied music. And to me, it is a bhajan which it goes through a particular tune. And of course, I have the experience of enjoying the melody in that and the experience of devotion, etc.
And add to the lyrics and you will have a certain theme or mood which the bhajan carries also.
Yeah, it works, as you said, a particular mood. But as such, for me, it's just an experience. I have not really delved into what causes that music to happen, or what causes that experience, what causes that emotion to happen. Whereas as they were doing the bhajan, they were teaching the bhajan, they're also going into something called swaras, the basic units of music.
Right.
So that, I was just thinking as to why would anybody actually, go and dissect music into so many parts and actually kill the, whole experience of it. And then it suddenly struck to me as to what is actually going on. So when you can distinguish music into swaras, sa, re, ga, ma, or do, re, mi, fa, those
right.
7 notes of, music. So when you do that, what does it allow you to do is to now create music yourself.
Right.
Like, that this particular, these notes in certain combination, they have a certain melody, and that melody has a certain effect. So that is why, in a very similar way, like when we inquire into these gunas, into nature as composed of the 3 gunas, it has the effect for us. Being able to distinguish nature into 3 gunas has the effect that we have an access now into as to how we can ourselves distinguish how it affects us and what we can do to improve our personality, so to speak, at a very basic level.
Yes, a philosopher once says, if you look at every person who's coming to you,
yes,
let's say somebody who's making you angry or somebody has the ability to incite your temper, if you look at it, that person as somebody who's coming for that purpose of making you angry, which means you getting angry means you're losing to him, because he's able to do what he has come to do.
Yes.
The moment that thought comes in, so to not be angry is actually your victory. So the moment you understand the cause and effect and what is somebody is trying to, maybe those who are actually so much into music will not be swayed by the mood of the raga.
Precisely, yes.
If you know that this raga is supposed to invoke this kind of a feeling in you, and you know that these are the swaras which go into it, maybe you're not going to just casually be carried away with the mood of the raga.
No, in fact, musicians, of course, they totally get into that mode of the raga, but the main point is that they can create also.
Right.
They're not merely the effect of that. They can, like as Lord Krishna says, that, he is in this particular world, he inhabits the world, or inhabits the 3 worlds, he has no need for any particular action.
Right.
Like he's totally beyond that, but yet he acts. It's much the same way as what you said. Like, you're very right. A musician can, being aware of what is the mechanism by which this particular mood gets created. He can say, okay, I'm not affected by that. Or he can completely lose himself in the raga. But he's also aware that he can also create that particular effect.
No, that is precisely what Swami showed us, in a little different note. Swami would often say, I never get angry.
Yes.
I only pretend to get angry.
Yeah.
And that is actually true. Because when Swami gets angry, you can actually see him angry. It is not that there is no pretension in that. There is no faking that emotion.
Correct.
He really would show the signs of a person who is really, kind of conquered by temper.
Absolutely. He can generate that particular emotion.
You could see Swami's eyes becoming red and you could see that Swami's physical frame trembling. But I remember some of my seniors once narrated, they had a certain unpleasant event which happened, after which Swami was very unhappy with boys. Apparently, as Swami would say, pretended to be very unhappy and angry with boys. And he decided to leave Brindavan in a huff. He just called the warden and said, I'm leaving. And called all these boys, and Swami was very angry, and everybody would come up to Swami and say, even Swami, very, very sorry, you forgive us. Swami would, push them, and Swami was very angry. And I don't know if you're aware, when Swami leaves Brindavan, Swami would come down the steps of Trai Brindavan.
Yes.
To the right, there would be all the students, all the boys and teachers,
Hmm.
and to the left would be the staff from the general hospital and the other lady Sevadal who take care of the Ramesh hall and all of them.
Yes.
They would be to the left of Swami when Swami is coming down the stairs, and to the right will be the boys. So here is Swami turning to the right. His eyes are red, and he's shouting at boys, and he's some of them even got a thrashing, I think.
Yes, yes.
Swami was so angry, and the very next second Swami was turning to his left, smiling at the ladies and waving bye to them.
Absolutely.
The next second he would turn to the boys and be angry and shout at them and turn to them. And the people who were honestly not involved in the emotion which went with this episode, those boys were very upset because they had somehow managed to make Swami unhappy, and that was hurting them. They might not have been in a position to see this wonder which Swami was actually exhibiting there, but those who were away from that incident, they were really awed by what Swami was doing.
In fact, one of my close friends, he was actually part of the students, but he used to stand a little apart for darshan. And his eyewitness account of this, he says it was so marvelous to see Swami on one side, exhibiting so much anger, and on the other hand, within a few seconds, just turning and exhibiting so much love. It was actually alternating, Prem. You will not believe, like Swami is able to show so much anger, and if he actually spoke to the two different sides on his right and left, nobody would have been able to put the picture together. The people on the left would not have imagined that what is going on the right, and vice versa.
Right. And having said what you said about gunas and the analogy of the one who has known the ragas, that's what Swami exhibited, and
Precisely.
I think through these discourses what Swami is trying to tell is you too are capable of this, but only thing is you're choosing to be on the receiving end. You're
Precisely.
choosing to be in the in the manipulated section of
Fantastic.
this one. But Swami is saying that you can come over to this side and this is where you rightfully belong.
Yes. Prem, actually, there are these certain personality development workshops, and people come with, various, they say we have this particular weakness or that weakness and all. So there is one particular, training method. Like, for example, I want to be able to transcend anger. Like, I don't want to be the effect of the violent nature or angry nature within me.
Okay.
So one very interesting way that they're able to actually take care of this is that they have people stand in front of a mirror and actually act out anger. Maybe they'll give you 4 lines of a poem. None of the words in that poem evoke any anger.
Okay.
But they'll have you recite those lines as if you're very, very, very upset. And I've actually gone through that. I was actually wondering what is the point of this exercise. Till, when I did that 3 or 4 times, at some point of time, suddenly in my mind it clicked that I can no longer be angry because I'm actually now able to see the whole process of generating that anger. At some point of time, I know I can check it. That was the, that I had in mind. And in fact, it allows you to generate anger when you have to. Really, when you totally have to, as a teacher or as a guru, you find yourself in a situation where that is necessary, and you'll not shy away from doing that.
Right. And I think all the processes which we're talking about, be it devotion or be it doing good karma, is all a process by which you can remove yourself from being manipulated or being a subject in the whole process and then inquire.
Precisely.
I reminded of a short story. There is this monastery where everybody is inspired to take to inquiry. Okay, so everything, you said that every smallest activity in your daily life, try to inquire.
Yes.
Why? How?
Right.
So there are these 2 friends. There's this one friend who is sitting at the bank of the river, looking into the river and maybe inquiring about something. So this other friend of his sneaks from behind and gives him a tight slap on his back. Just a friendly slap. But it ends up to be a very, very tight slap. So the other friend of his is in pain, he's rubbing, and the guy who comes and slaps him says, did you realize, where did that sound come from? Did it come from my hand or did it come from your back?
Wow.
He's set himself into a process of inquiry, and he's already, kind of impressed by that thought.
Right.
Where does the sound come from? Is it coming from my hand or from your back?
Your back.
So the other friend tells him, it's indeed an interesting question that you're asking, but I cannot think in those lines because I'm feeling the pain.
Yes.
So only if you remove yourself from that, the pain, that feeling or that emotion which is involved in that moment, you can actually take into a path of inquiry.
Yes. You brought up a very important point over here, which is again like why Swami is having us inquire into these gunas. So, as we said, the aspects of tamoguna gives rise to sloth. And the aspect of Rajaguna, it leads to the passions, the passions of anger and greed, avarice, etc. So now what we see, now we can actually see what is the effect of all the sadhanas, the various sadhanas that we do, or what Swami prescribes for all of us. So Swami prescribes, for example, Namasmarana. He says, contemplate on the name of the Lord. And so we do bhajans, etc. Or Swami says, do dhyana. And in every such, sadhana that we do, it is the effort that we do to stop being the effect of these gunas and slowly, move towards being established in sattva.
Right.
Because as later we read, sattva is what allows the discriminative power of the mind to actually come into play. And it is at this point of time that we can start inquiring as to who we truly are. And as the philosophy states, the whole idea is that if we can fix the mind onto what lies beyond the three gunas or beyond the aspects of creation, so that is when we really become one with the entire creation.
Right. And from what Swami said here, all these things are expression of that sattva guna, and so the first step, understandably and quite logically, is to do everything on the basis of that guna.
Yes.
Before you transcend even that, because even when Swami spoke about Antahkarana, Swami said the idea of purifying the Antahkarana is to annihilate it.
Yes. And in fact, even as we are reading about how the origin of each one of these senses, the point that you made that they have a divine or a pure provenance, it is also echoes with what Swami says. He says, for example, Swami says, for what reason has God given you eyes? Is it for your eyes to light upon every kind of dirty scenarios that you see around? It is for you to look at with worship at the divine form of the Lord. Or what are ears given for? Is it for you to listen to gossip? And he says, no, it is for you to listen to the sweet name of the Lord.
Right.
So it's one more, this is one more occasion for us to remind ourselves as to how our lives are to be led in consonance with what Swami has said. And knowing that what is the provenance or the origin of each one of our senses, it is for us to reflect upon how we should, use these particular organs effectively.
Right. And it will definitely also help in looking at what Swami has asked us to do. As you said, Namasmarana, Seva, whatever it is. And also keep in mind what is the final state which Swami actually wants to lead us to.
The objective. Yeah.
That will actually help us do what Swami is asking us to do better. And, once maybe you could conclude with this. Anil Kumar sir was saying, in Kodaikanal, Swami had called all the students and staff who were part of Swami's entourage. And that time there was some excavation behind Sashwati which was happening for the extension of the dining hall. So Swami had called all these students and Swami had asked them to shramdhan, to offer a shramdhan, come and help in the work which is going on. So they would go and, lift those sands and throw it on the other side, or break some rocks.
Right.
So when the work was going on, Swami just happened to walk in just to see how it was progressing. Swami looked at Anil Kumar sir and asked, did I come and ask you to work here because I can't afford workers?
Right.
Swami asked me, you think I didn't find workers or I can't afford workers and I asked you to work? Swami said, sing bhajans and do. That is the very purpose for which I brought you here.
Right.
The moment you do what Swami is asking you to do with the understanding that this is where Swami is leading us, it will make that act even more appropriate and make it as it is supposed to be.
Yes. Sanctify every little karma that we do. Yes.
Right. So thank you, Hari. And it was indeed a profound discourse. And I should thank you for your company.
Yeah, I was just wondering that the students who had listened to the discourse on that day, I think it would have sent them scurrying to the library to find out what all this was about.
Definitely, really. But as Venkatraman said when he was here, he said it only of all things shows Swami's love that he's, taking the pains to explain all this to us.
Yes.
And we should offer our gratitude to Swami for that. So dear listeners, this brings us to the end of this week's episode of Shravanam Mananam Nididhyasanam. I thank Brother Harishankar on behalf of all of you. This is Prem from Team Radio Sai, thanking all of you for your company and thanking Bhagwan for this opportunity. Thank you. Jai Sai Ram.
Sai Ram, you just heard an episode of our radio series Shravanam Mananam Nididhyasanam, that is, listen, reflect and act. This is a segment that is broadcast live on Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. on Asia stream of Radio Sai Global Harmony. And this episode was hosted by Radio Sai's Prem and Hari Shankar from the Sri Satya Sai Central Trust. Today's episode was first broadcast live on the 26th of December 2013. The discourses undertaken for the study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of the summer course in Indian culture and spirituality in the year 1990. The clips played in this episode were from the discourse delivered on 28th May 1990. To listen to the next part of this program, tune in same time next week. Please do write to us and let us know what you think about this program by writing to listener@radiosai.org. Thank you and Sai Ram from Prashanthi Nilayam.